Dear teachers, welcome to the Learning Resources lecture. We are continuing with Unit 1, that is Educational Communication, which has 20% weightage. So far, we have covered the concept of communication, which included meaning, components of communication, communication cycle, types of communication, that is verbal and non-verbal. We have also seen the modes of communication. We have covered the significance of communication in teaching learning, which included reflective as well as interpersonal communication. After that, we saw the strategies to overcome inhibitive factors in communication as well as to enhance communication. So we have seen the strategies for to overcome the inhibitive factors as well as to enhance communication, which was included in the subtopic classroom communication and analysis of its facilitative and inhibitive nature. We have moved on to the next subtopic, that is abstractness or concreteness provided by different learning experiences, and we have seen the meaning of learning experiences. So if you remember, in the last lecture I have told you how you had a learning experience in your nursery or in your primary, because of which you still remember maybe your nursery rhymes or the numbers that were taught to you in the primary section, or for that matter even at your school level. Moving on from that, we will now look at the role of media in communication with respect to the Dale's cone of experiences. This was Edgar Dale, who was an American educationist, and he was a professor of education. Okay, and he developed this famous cone of experience. Of course, he made several contributions to audio and visual instruction as well, including a methodology for analyzing the content of motion pictures. So in his cone of experience, what he did is that he developed a cone and he said that what kind of experience should be imparted to the students so that they understand the content or whatever is taught to them in a better manner. So this was Edgar Dale's cone of experience. Let us see what it says. Okay. Now the organizing principle of this cone was a progression from the most concrete experiences at the bottom of the cone to the most abstract ones, which will be at the top. Okay, so the most concrete experiences, experience which the students can relate to, which they can understand, which they can touch, which they can feel. This kind of experiences were kept at the bottom of the cone, and right at the top there were abstract experiences. So we will look at that as well. Now, if you remember, Confucius has said, I see and I forget, I hear and I remember, and I do and I understand. So when you see, you may forget, when you hear, you may remember, but when you will do it, you will understand. So that was kind of the guiding principle for this cone of experiences that Edgar Dale devised. Now, Dale's own claims for this classification system are very modest and qualified. Okay, so he advised against viewing the categories as rigid, inflexible divisions. So he said that you don't have to look at this cone as it is. You can be flexible and you can move the rank or the order. Or you can. It is not necessary that it is in a. You have to follow this cone in a particular hierarchy. You can interchange the place of the experiences. Okay, so it said over here, he insisted that a classification should not be regarded as any sort of hierarchy or rank order. So there is he has categorically stated that it is not necessary that you view this cone as it is. You can shift the experiences, you can shift the categories according to your experience, according to the students that you are dealing with. So this is how the cone of experiences, this is how it looks. So if you look down over here, these are direct purposeful experiences. So let us start from the left hand side before we go to the right hand side of the cone. If you look at the left hand side of your screen, right at the bottom you see low or concrete. These are the experiences, and this is the degree of abstraction in which the cone is placed. Okay, so if you look over here, these are the experiences which have lower degree of abstraction and more concrete degrees of concrete examples are given, or concrete experiences are imparted over here. Whereas at the top, as you go towards the top of the cone, you see abstract experiences. So right from the bottom to the top, the degree of abstraction increases. And here at the right at the top of the cone, the degree of abstraction is very high. That means you will just, for instance, abstract experiences would be wherein you are just talking to the students and you expect them to understand a particular concept. For instance, like if you see over here text and verbal symbols, you just show them the symbols and you expect the students to understand. Now, this can happen normally in the higher classes. You will, let us say, you will read a passage and you expect them uh, to visualize what has been read. Whereas when it comes to concrete experiences, you have to actually give them those experiences. If you are going to talk about, let us say, a chair in the class, so show them a chair, let them feel the chair, let them feel the, if it is a wooden chair, tell them how it is, show them how it is. If it is a metal chair, show them how it is. A chair that a teacher normally uses to sit in the class. Okay, that chair I'm talking about. Then if you're talking about a table in the class, okay, if you're going to give them an experience related to a table, so show them what is a table. Let them feel it. If you're going to talk about a mobile phone for that matter, they will know what a mobile phone is. So when you are talking to the lower students in the lower class, or let us say in the primary section, or maybe fifth standard, sixth standard, you have to give them concrete experiences so that they can remember the concept. Now let us move on to the right hand side and see what kind of experiences we are talking about. We are talking about direct and purposeful experiences. We are going to talk about contrived experiences, then dramatized experiences, demonstrations, field trips, exhibits, motion pictures, still pictures or radio recordings, then just pictures, visual symbols, and finally text or verbal symbols. Now, if you remember, we just spoke earlier. Dale or Edgar Dale did not want that this cone is viewed according to the categories as they are placed. There is no hierarchy, as he had said. So if you feel that your students can understand that particular concept or a given particular concept with just exhibits or with just motion pictures, might as well you can start with motion pictures. But if you feel that they will understand with a direct purposeful experience, we will of course look at all these experiences, what they are, a bit later. So if you feel that you can dramatize something and explain it to them, you can do that. If you feel that you can just give them the notes and they can understand, you can go ahead and do that as well. So here it is. So Edgar Dale's cone of experience, on the left hand side you see people generally remember learning activities, and people are able to do that is learning outcomes. So what are the learning activities on left side, what are the outcomes on the right side? So if you see, we start from the bottom of the cone: design, perform a presentation or do the real thing, simulate, model or experience a lesson, design collaborative lessons, participate in hands-on workshops, watch a demonstration, attend exhibits, watch videos, view images, hear, and just read. So you see, if you look over here towards the left hand side of the cone, the bottom two categories, you can say 90% of what they do. So these are the two categories which normally the students will do. They will design something, they will do a presentation, they will perform something, they will design a model. The remaining two categories above that, the third and the fourth one, is 70% of what they say and write. So they participate in hands-on workshops, design collaborative lessons. Then the next one says 50% of what they see and hear. So they will attend exhibits and sites and see and try and listen to what is being told to them. They will watch a demonstration, so they will see and hear what you're saying. So 50% of this they will remember. 30% of what they see, view images, watch videos, 20% of what they hear, and 10% of what they read. Okay, so this is how normally our learning activities have to be designed. And if you look over here, analyze, define, create, evaluate, these are the four categories. The last four categories will help them to analyze the situation, uh, define the given problems, create some solutions, evaluate what has been done. The above three or four categories say that the demonstration, application, and the practice part is involved in that. And the last two categories say that uh, it, the problems can be defined, described, listed, or explained. This is just a cone of experience. So you need to actually look at these categories over here. These are more important for us to understand, so that as teachers we can go ahead and do justice to whatever we are teaching in the class. So let us understand these experiences which are here. That is, for instance, direct purposeful experiences, contrived experiences, dramatized experiences, and so on and so forth. So let us look at that. What do you understand by direct purposeful experiences? These are the real experiences, first-hand experiences, such experiences form the basis of all learning, and therefore make up the foundation of our learning. So these are the experiences that our senses bring to us, because of which we construct ideas, concepts, and this gives meaning and order to our lives. For example, interaction with real objects. So you can carry models to class, or let us say if you are going to talk about fruits, you can carry some fruits to class. If you're going to talk about uh, some vegetables, you can carry some vegetables to class as a teacher. Yes, you have to do that as your instructional materials. If you're going to talk about some situations, you can enact those situations, or give them situations which they can remember, which they can relate to. Some phenomena, you can show them the phenomena of evaporation. It can happen. Then practice teaching lessons. These are for teacher educators, of course, practice teaching lessons. So these are some direct purposeful experiences. They are direct experiences which are given to them with a purpose, so that they can understand the concepts. Then contrived experiences, when real experiences cannot be used or are too difficult to be shown or used, or we make use of contrived experiences in these scenarios. So the word contrived means made up experiences, or also called edited copies of reality, and are used as a substitute for the real thing. So these experiences are so designed that they closely resemble the real experience. So for instance, uh, in subjects like history, geography, science, it does become difficult to expose students at all times to direct experiences. So for instance, if you're going to talk about the unit on transportation, okay, so it is definitely not possible for you to bring actual buses or trucks or containers or ships in the class. So what will you do? You will try and get the models of these trucks and trains, or maybe even the ships. So similarly, in geography class, it is not possible for you to bring the polar regions to the class. Correct. So what you do, you try and create that experience in the class. So that is why it is said these contrived experiences are are not real but a copy of the real. So editing of reality happens when it comes to contrived experiences. Then what are dramatized experiences and role plays? The act of imagining ourselves acting out in a situation and performing a role is sometimes very close to the reality of the situation. This normally happens with peer teaching in teacher education setup. What happens is that you will give lessons to your peers, that is the students of B.Ed itself, and you will act as a teacher and they will be your students. Okay, so that is called dramatization. Now for instance, when it comes to maths also, you can always have a role play wherein the student has visited a shop and trying to buy things or groceries. You can make one student as a shopkeeper, another student as the customer, and you can act out the various calculations which are involved. So this is called a role play, and the students remember that very easily, because they will also take part in the role plays or in these dramatized experiences, and it helps them to remember these things easily. Then demonstrations, of course, in science you can do demonstrations because it is a visualized explanation of an important fact, idea, or process, and it shows how certain things are done. So in simple words, a demonstration means to show clearly so as to enable understanding. You're showing you're showing that process, or that, let us say, experiment, or you're demonstrating it in the class so that the students can understand clearly. Now, demonstration involves showing by reason or proof, explaining or making clear by use of examples or experiments. Like, for example, in science, carbon dioxide turning lime water milky. You can always show that. You can also show the Newton's first law of motion. You can read a map in history or geography. Okay, so all these things can be done in class, which forms a part of demonstrations. Then field trips also fall into the category of experiential education, which was made famous by John Dewey, who said education is life itself. So field trips are conducted primarily for the purpose of experiencing something that cannot be encountered inside the classroom. So you cannot experience nature by sitting on the bench or your chairs. So you have to go out. If you need to learn about trees, you cannot sit in the class. You have to go out. So this is where field trips will play an important role. And field trips help students to build their kinesthetic learning, that is learning by doing. So they will do things. They will actually go for that walk or for that field trip, and they will actually learn about the environment. They will learn about plants. So they will also learn about many other things which are available in nature, which are, for that matter, present, which are not present in the class but outside the class. They can get excited about learning new processes or about things or events. You can take them to museums. You can take them to uh, to any sites which are of historical importance. Okay, so this will help them to understand the content which you would otherwise teach them in the class in a better manner. Now, field trips can be focused almost on any subject. So for life sciences, discovering the ecological relationships within a local park, lake, or river. History field trips can have students visit local landmarks, old settlements, or heritage structures that have been preserved. Then exhibits. Now these are displays to be seen by people or students. So they may be made of wood, clay, or any other suitable material, and may consist of working models, or maybe models that include sensory experiences where people can touch and even manipulate them. Okay, so exhibits will help them to get a feel of whatever is being taught to them. So classroom projects, science exhibits, museum exhibits, and artifacts, etc., would be examples of exhibits. And a model is actually a representation of a real world phenomena or object in as many respects as possible with the real object, but not in size. So models are used for describing, explaining, and making students understand. On the other hand, a mock-up is a full-scale or full-size model of a design or device. So a model is a miniature of whatever is the actual size of the, let us say, something that you want to show. Like, for instance, a ship. Model, if you call it a model, then the size will be very small compared to the actual size of the ship. So it is an imitation or representation of the real world object. If you're talking about a ship or a bus for that matter, or a truck, so a model will be smaller in size. But but these models can be used to explain, that is, describe and explain the object very clearly. Whereas on the other hand, there's something called a mock-up, which is a full scale or full size model of a design or device, which is used for teaching, demonstration, design, evaluation, promotion, and other purpose. For example, mock-up of what a car would look like before it goes into production. So you can always have that. Of course, not in the class, but otherwise you can think of some other mock-ups for your class instructional materials. But this is just an example which I have mentioned over here. Then motion pictures and televisions, of course, sound and motion. Whenever sound and motion are involved, it has a lasting impression on the students' minds. So motion pictures can actually reconstruct reality of the past so very well that we can feel that we are there. Okay. Overall, it takes a viewer into the motion picture to experience the feelings what are being felt over there in the given picture that they see, or for that matter, the given experience that they are experiencing. Now the best part is that they can always be played, they can be paused, or or student can rewind it and see it, yeah, or watch it, and they can view it as many times as needed. And still pictures or radio recordings are visual and auditory devices. Still pictures, of course, lack the sound and motion as seen in motion pictures, so the degree of abstraction has increased. And of course, the radio broadcast is only mostly it is audio, so you do not not mostly, rather, radio broadcast is always audio, so there is no visual component involved in it. So as a result of that, the degree of abstraction has increased. Then pictures, visual symbols, they are highly abstract. Consider, for example, graphs and charts, sketches or maps and cartoons. They are highly abstract, so it is very difficult for students to understand if they are in the lower classes. So students find it extremely difficult to analyze the content in such materials unless they are in the higher classes and they have gone through all these concrete experiences earlier, and the teachers have explained to them the pictures and visual symbols clearly. Now, text and verbal symbols, this level is concerned with written words and spoken words. So words can be used to describe real objects, ideas, principles, formulae. So normally whenever there is a discussion, explanation, lecture, uh, verbal symbols or text symbols are used, or text messages are used. Now this, of course, is at the highest degree of abstraction. Okay, let us move on now. Okay. After that, after the Dale scale of experiences, where we have seen all these categories of experiences that the students can have, we will move on to using multiple intelligences to plan effective communication materials for your students. Now, of course, the theory of multiple intelligences was developed in 1983 by Dr. Howard Gardner, who is a professor of education at Harvard University. And it suggested that the traditional notion of intelligence, which was based on IQ testing, is far too limited. So instead, Dr. Gardner proposes 8 different intelligences to account for a broader range of human potential in children and adults. So according to Dr. Howard Gardner, a student's intelligence cannot be measured by just with only one or in only one particular way. There will be different ways of assessing the student's intelligence. So what he did is that he came up with 8 different intelligences. He felt that a student can learn not only in one way but in different ways. So he came up with these 8 intelligences. The first one is linguistic intelligence, which is also known as word smart. Some students will understand if you use only words. They do not need any other supporting documents for that or supporting experience for that. They are very good with words. They are very good with languages. So they will understand with just with the words or with languages. And this kind of intelligence is known as linguistic intelligence. Then something called logical mathematical intelligence, wherein they are very good at numbers. They are very good with numbers. They can solve the problems very easily. They enjoy solving problems. So these kind of students are called are said to have logical mathematical intelligence. Then there are some students who will be good with pictures. So they are called picture smart, or they have spatial intelligence. So they can easily, they find themselves very comfortable whenever there is a picture which is shown to them or something is explained to them with pictures. There are some students who have bodily kinesthetic intelligence, where they are called body smart, wherein they like to do activities, they like to do hands-on jobs so that they can go ahead and learn new things or new things. There's something called musical intelligence, wherein these students like music and they like to learn. They can learn in a better way if music is used during the lessons. Then there is interpersonal intelligence, wherein people it is also called people smart. Students like to interact with each other and understand the concepts in a better way. So there is discussion, role plays. When these things take place, these students understand the concept in a better way. Something called intrapersonal intelligence is also there, wherein they understand, they're self-smart. That means they normally interact with themselves to understand a particular concept. Then there is naturalist intelligence, wherein the students are known as nature smart. That means they love to be out in the nature and they can understand things in a better way. So the theory of multiple intelligence proposes a major transformation in the way our schools are run. And it suggests that teachers should be trained to present the lessons in a wide variety of ways, using music, cooperative learning, art activities, role play, multimedia field trips, inner reflection, and much more. So you should adapt yourself to use all these different ways of teaching. Your teaching should not be only using chalk and board. You need to go out of the box and use different ways of teaching. So how to use MI in the class, multiple intelligence in the classroom? First and foremost, it will help you to get to know your students better. So if you know your students better, you will know which activities or which intelligence you can use. And you can then expand upon your traditional activities. Let us see which are some of the activities. Now for linguistic intelligence, you can ask the students to write a story about what they are studying. You can ask them while learning a process, you can have them write an instruction manual or give a how-to speech. You can ask them to write scripts. These are just suggestive examples regarding linguistic intelligence and what activities you can do. For logical mathematical intelligence, beyond doing math problems, this intelligence also focuses on logical reasoning and problem solving. So you can ask them to conduct surveys, show them graphs, ask them to make graphs or charts. Then for English or history classes, you can ask them to, you can use a debate to teach the basics of logic and rhetoric. So these are some of the examples for logical mathematical intelligence. Now for bodily kinesthetic, the students can act out a skit or dance or physically simulate a scientific process. So all these things can be done. Visual spatial, these are picture smart students, so ask them to draw diagrams so that they can learn in a better way. Illustrate a group project or develop a PowerPoint presentation, give them these activities. Okay. If musical intelligence is there, then you can ask the students to sing a song or give a tune to a particular poem or to a difficult concept or to something which they like in a lesson. So ask them to give the tune. Then you can ask them to create podcasts or auditory products. All these things can be done. Then interpersonal, these learners are usually the ones who cannot stop talking because they like to interact with others. So take advantage of that energy through class discussions or group work. Let them teach the class or use technology to have them interact with others. Okay, so you can do these things. Then intrapersonal, give these students assignments that challenge them to make connections between their personal experiences and the class subject. So ask them to write blogs, maybe journals, essays on personal topics. So you can give them these activities. Naturalistic intelligence, you can incorporate the outside world to hold these students' attention. So field trips are very ideal for such students. Okay, because it will help them to kind of go out of the classroom situation and experience something new. So you can ask them to maybe plant trees. You can use flowers or rocks for maths problems. So as a teacher, you need to be more creative. Then come up with assignments so that you can reach out to all the multiple intelligences. However, of course, it is understandable that it will be very difficult to come up with these activities which will cater to all the multiple intelligences in the class, because it will be definitely time consuming. So what you can do is that you can pick one or two intelligences that you don't normally use in your lessons and find a way to incorporate them. Interpersonal, intrapersonal, and naturalistic can be some of the easier ones to start with. So what you can do is that you can go ahead and do it in your lessons. What could be the other solution? Choose one common assignment and brainstorm all these activities in your class. How will you do it like this? How will you do it without this particular intelligence or with that particular intelligence, you can go ahead and do that. Okay. So what we will do is that right now we will stop here. We have come, we have finished unit 1, educational communication. I will go ahead and send you a Google form to just see how much you've understood. And of course, if you have any difficulties, as I have already told you, and I have been always telling you, please you can get back to me on WhatsApp, Telegram. We have also set up the Google Classroom account, so you can always so that you can always have access to the any extra material, any extra reference material that I will be putting. I will be also uploading these lectures in the classroom, so that you can have access to it as well. So apart from that, if you have any difficulties, you can always get back to me. You can let me know if you feel that. Of course, we have made the group, the WhatsApp, the Telegram group, so that we can discuss the academic material, or the academic discussion can take place over there. If you are not comfortable sharing anything on the group, you can let me know on my personal WhatsApp. You can directly message me, and I will try and answer your queries. So if you have anything else, you can let me know. Uh, Thank you for your time. I hope these asynchronous lectures are helping you, and I'm sure you will benefit from these lectures. So thank you for your time. You may go for your next lecture. God bless you all.